Hey there, welcome to the Thema Mundi, Divination and Domiciles of the Planets. I'm Shauna with Neo-Feminine Astrology, and I'm excited to share this topic with you. This is, full disclosure, a little bit of a more geeky astrology topic compared to my other content, but it's very important because it really lays a big piece of the foundation for understanding how to read your birth chart and understanding how aspects work and understanding essentially where to look, what thread to follow when you're looking at any planet in the birth chart. So I want to first share with you that the idea of the Thema Mundi literally translates to the birth chart of the world, or the nativity of the cosmos. And it is essentially an astrology chart. I thought this was a really beautiful image here from a temple in India. And a birth chart is really, or any kind of chart, is really a mandala. And so there's a lot of divinity and symbolism coded into the Thema Mundi and any kind of like circular pattern or chart. And I think this is important because it's a whole system. And I think that it's really easy to forget that when you're looking at astrology or your birth chart. I can't tell you how many people I've spoken to when I show them the circle of their chart, and they have never looked at it that way. They've always just looked at like a list of you are this, you are that, you are that. And it can be really helpful to look at that and to have things listed out. It can be easy to absorb that information. And when you're looking at it that way, you lose the view of the big picture and how everything ties in together. So with that being said, I want to, let's jump right into an image of the Thema Mundi. So let's see, share, and then here we go. Okay. So this is a version that I created of the Thema Mundi. So if you Google Thema Mundi astrology online and you look at the images, most of them are going to have the glyphs of the planets here instead of what I've typed. But I typed it because I know that you might not be familiar with the glyphs. I hope that this makes sense. If you're watching this, just stay with me as far as the signs and things like that. So the Thema Mundi always starts with Cancer rising. So the rising sign in a chart in Western astrology is always going to be on this left side right here. And so depending on what house system you're looking at, this line may mark the rising sign exactly, or the rising point may be somewhere in this first house here. But this is always going to be the rising area, always going to be the first house. And so the Thema Mundi will always start with Cancer, and I'll tell you more about why in a moment. And then, as with any chart, we'll go through the signs from Cancer to Leo to Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, and so on in order of the tropical zodiac. And so the planets in the Thema Mundi are always placed in these particular areas. So the moon in Cancer, the sun in Leo, Mercury in Virgo, Venus in Libra, Mars in Scorpio, Jupiter in Sagittarius, and then Saturn finally in Capricorn. And there is a very specific reason that each of these planets were put here. And so there's a lot of different philosophical views on why. So a little backstory as well as far as the Thema Mundi is that this is from the Hellenistic era of astrology. So in the Hellenistic times, in And this is something that we didn't have until fairly recently. So when astrology became more popular, especially in the 70s in the West, we didn't have this, or it wasn't commonly popular or talked about. And so that's a part of why we started to have the modern rulerships, where you might have read that Uranus rules Aquarius, and Pluto rules Scorpio, Neptune rules Pisces. And I think that a part of why that happened was because we weren't aware of this original system. And the way that this is set up is so that everything really connects together. And I'll show you the rulerships of the full, where all the, there are planets that go in these empty areas as well. And so this is essentially a teaching tool and a divination tool, because the idea behind the Thema Mundi, the theory is that this is a symbolistic chart of the soul of the world, the soul of the cosmos, the soul of the world that we live in at this point in time. And again, there's many different philosophies. I think one that's really interesting is that in Egypt, in the summer months, the Nile was said to, or the Nile typically would flood at some point. It was really hot, and that was in the Cancerian season. And there's all of the symbolism, and a certain star was on the horizon. And so when that flood happened, to them, that symbolized a rebirth and the birth of a new era or a new time. And so there's a lot of symbolism with Cancer being on the rising sign for that reason. And there's lots of other theories that you could look up as well. But I think it's really interesting that we're starting with Cancer versus Aries at the beginning of the zodiac. And I think it also speaks to this earthly existence, because the moon is cycles and rhythms, and it is that part of us that's connected to nature in a cyclical, rhythmic way. And so if you're looking at this and you're already familiar with the rulerships, you'll notice that these planets are all in rulership. So the moon is in Cancer, the sun is in Leo, Mercury in Virgo, Venus in Libra, Mars in Scorpio. These planets are all ruling these signs. The other thing that you'll notice when you're looking at this is that it goes in order of speed of the planet and distance from the sun. So Mercury, it never gets more than one sign away from the sun before it turns retrograde. And Venus, a little further out, Venus never gets it never gets more than 2 signs away from the sun, so it's 1, 2 away before it also turns retrograde. And then Mars can get up to 3 signs. Mars can go a little bit farther. And then Jupiter, and then Saturn is the farthest out, the slowest in this system. And so we have this sort of pattern that's happening here. And I want to show you, I want to jump for a second to the traditional rulerships. Let's see. There we go. Okay. And so with this, we see essentially things have been mirrored onto the other side of the semicircle. If we were to slice things in half, right, at Leo and Aquarius, the sun and the moon are kind of like that beginning point. And then Mercury rules Gemini, Venus rules Taurus, Mars rules Aries, Jupiter Pisces, and then Saturn Aquarius. And so what's neat about this is that each planet has, with the exception of the sun and the moon, each planet has a masculine sign that it rules and a feminine sign that it rules. And so there's a lot of equanimity and balance here. And then, of course, the sun rules the masculine sign of Leo, moon rules the feminine sign of Cancer. The feminine signs are earth signs and water signs, and then the masculine signs are fire and air. And so what does rulership mean, and why is it important? So rulership is important because it shows the capability of a planet to express all of its significations in the most true way to its form. So the sun is about ego. It's about identity. It is your ability to share and to give out, to give warmly from the heart. It's your life force energy that just radiates out of you. And so when this is in the sign of Leo, which is fire sign, it's fixed sign, it's bright, there's a certain sense of the sun being able to do its job in that area. Versus if the sun is, let's say, in Libra, down here, there's different things to think about here. So the sun is not only going to take on symbolic qualities of Libra, which is about relationships, partnerships, looking to the other in order to define oneself. But the sun is also going to depend on Venus, because Venus rules Libra, in order to express, in order to do its job, in order to have self-definition, which is the sun's job. And so then you would look to Venus in the chart and look to how Venus is placed, what Venus is doing, aspects that it's making. And so this is important because you're not just looking at the sun is in Libra and that's a descriptor and then end of story. We're looking at it as the sun relies on Venus in order to help it do its job. In rulership, one of the common metaphors is that when a planet is in rulership, it's like it's in its own home, it's in its own house. So it's like if you are in your own house, you can do what you need to do, you can live your life, you have all of the things that belong to you at your very close proximity to you, and you can do things easily. Versus when a planet is in someone else's house, someone else's sign, that's essentially like you're at someone else's house. And so depending on how you feel about that person, how they feel about you, it's going to be more easy or more difficult for you to get comfortable, for you to do things that you need to do generally, just for you to be yourself. And same with the planets. So when they are in another sign that they do not rule, it's going to be easier or more difficult for them to be themselves. And a piece of this is when there's an exaltation, it's said to be very, very beneficial and very easy for a planet to do its job. Versus when there is a fall or detriment, it can be more challenging for a planet to do its job. And I think that it doesn't always have to mean that it's more difficult. It sometimes means just that you need to be more creative with things, or that it can be a challenge until you figure out how to work with that energy. But that it's like there's something more that needs to be discovered there. So we'll cover exaltation, fall, detriment, all that good stuff in another video, but I just wanted to give you a little insight into, those are factors as well, and those play into this whole system as well. And also, as we're looking at this, the reason why this is important I think, and the reason why it's something that's so tuned into every single chart is because if we are using the philosophy that this is the birth chart of the world, the nature of the cosmos, the nature of life, then that influence is within every single person, every single chart. So it's not just that you're looking at these in terms of like rules, like this is what rules this and this is what rules that and end of story, done. It's like you're tapping into the nature of things and how things work together. So there's that element. And then of course, there is also the nature of free will and how we decide to work with this energy, how we decide to embody if we have a planet in a certain area that maybe it does indicate something challenging or just something simply that you're not comfortable with, or that you've read things about that you don't really like. It's like, well, okay, what other symbolism is there for you to work with? So that feels like a good place to end for today. And I do want to share with you as well, if this is something that you're interested in learning more about. There is a book called Hellenistic Astrology by Chris Brennan, and he writes a lot. It's a very thick book. It's a lot of information about this kind of astrology, and he has a very long section on the Thema Mundi and other things like this. So that's something for you to look up as well. And also, if you are on Patreon with this video, you'll be getting an image of both the Thema Mundi and the rulerships. And so I encourage you to download this, to put it on your phone or print it out and have it so that you can look at it, because the more that you get to know the rulerships by heart, the easier it is for you to understand how everything is all working together. And when you look at a chart, to know which planet you want to look at and where to go from there. So I hope that you enjoyed this. I am wishing you a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you soon. Namaste.